What I'd like to do tonight is basically three things. First, I want to talk about Robert's Rules in a very general way. As Liam mentioned, I taught a course in this at Concord, and that opening stuff would be what I did on opening day. The theory and some of the basic outlines of how Robert's Rules works. Then I want to talk about some things that have to do with committees in particular, the AAC, and conclude with an opportunity to handle questions, and especially questions about what it is you'd like to do and how to go about it, if you everything you always wanted to know but were afraid to ask. So I actually have a PowerPoint, which will save you the trouble of looking at me, and I want to launch that now if I can. So let's start with the most basic and theoretical questions here. What is parliamentary procedure, and why are we mindful of it? Why do we do it? Why do we bother? So first slide here. I have pictures of people here in the middle of my screen. Is that the case for everybody else? This is Henry Martin Robert. He was brigadier in the Corps of Engineers, born in 1837. According to Robert, and he included this story in the last several editions of his Rules of Order, still there. His interest in the subject came from when he was the senior military officer on a post in California. Doesn't say where, I suspect San Francisco. He was a specialist in harbor improvements. As a senior officer, he was asked to conduct a meeting of a group. It was a non-military group. And this prospect filled him with horror. He had no idea how to go about it. So he muddled his way through, but he vowed that he wasn't going to do that again without trying to figure out how it should be done. So how did he go about that? He gives a detailed history in the story that's included in his book, and the issues that he faced are interesting. But the short version is that what he produced eventually came from several sources. First, from extensive research. He looked at about everything he could, and he found that that wasn't that much. He also drew on experience, both his own as he was asked to chair further meetings and that of other people. He also drew on his own thinking about it, just tried to figure out how it should work. I think his background as an engineer may have contributed to that approach. And finally, he just used common sense. He could not get a publisher to publish his book unless he put up the money for it himself, but he did. Robert's Rules, this is the first edition here, the 1876 edition, pocket manual. Later on, I'll show you the current edition, which is the 12th, and no longer fits in any pockets, but it's been in continuous publication since then. The first edition sold out in a matter of a couple of months, surprise bestseller. Robert's Rules is still edited by his descendants. As I mentioned, the current one is much longer than the others. Besides growing in size, the status of the work has changed over time. What Roberts thought he was doing originally was coming up with a set of pre-made rules that groups could adopt rather than having them make up their own. And then that is still fundamentally true. The only people who are bound by Robert's Rules are those groups that agree to be bound by them, who adopt them as their own rules of procedure. But the status of the work has changed. Now, there is a general expectation that a meeting is going to be conducted according to Robert's Rules. If you depart from that, it's sort of terrible. So let's get into what he produced here. These are the meetings that he was chairing were meetings of what he called deliberative assemblies. Deliberative assembly is analogous to the English Parliament, which, of course, he looked at but did not use their rules in spite of the title of his book, or the U.S. House of Representatives, which did form the basis for what Roberts did. In other words, even on a local small scale, deliberative assembly meets for two purposes. First, they meet to deliberate. That is, they meet to give collective thought to an issue. Second, they meet to act. So everybody who has any experience with meetings realizes how easy it is to use much time and accomplish little in meetings. First thing we need to say about parliamentary procedure is that this is what it's all about getting things done right. You have to have an equal emphasis on both words. Unfortunately, when we hear it mentioned frequently in a different context, parliamentary maneuvers are synonymous with chicanery, and the whole thing is often seen as a needlessly complex and designed chiefly to befuddle the layperson. But Robert's rules do make sense. There are complicated issues, but the basic principle is simple, and the basic rules are logical. So this is it: to deliberate and to act. You don't want to do one without the other. You don't want to deliberate without ever doing anything. You don't want to act without thinking about it first. So how do we achieve this? So let's start with deliberation. There are three basic premises which shape the rules of deliberation. First, that productive attention can only be given to one issue at a time, hence rules of focus. Second, that informed decisions are likely to be better than uninformed ones, I call rules of study. And third, that the best way to discuss, to ensure that decisions are informed, is to hear from everyone who wishes to speak on a topic. That is, what people have to say about something is valuable. So 2 and 3 may be losing a little traction in our society, but I trust we believe that these things are true. This is my own scheme, by the way. Roberts' focus, study, and discussion are not official categories in Roberts, but they are what actually happens. So let's start with rules of focus. No, actually, my next slide has to do with action, which I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's talk about this as long as we're here. So assemblies act by voting. Voting to work. The question must be crystal clear. If anybody does not understand what they're voting on, and that is frequently a problem, then it's no good. The count has to be accurate. Some of my slides are missing, it appears. All right, so I'm going to back up a little bit. And since it's more complicated than it's worth to back up the actual slides, let me just talk back. So I want to go first into rules of focus. It's essential to enforce rules, whether you're conducting a meeting yourself as the chair or just attending one, because everyone who attends a meeting is at least in part responsible for enforcing the rules. There are mechanisms to do that, in fact. But we limit discussion to one topic at a time. Individuals have problems with multitasking, and groups absolutely cannot do it. Such rules apply to things like the presentation, reception of reports, and they're also the reason why there are motions. So when a report is being made, the person reporting is supposed to report and nothing else. If he or she is presenting a committee conclusion, then only the committee's collective wisdom is to be presented. If the report is discussed, only matters presented in that report can be discussed. Any questions pertaining to its content are appropriate. No others are appropriate. When a motion is on the floor, only that motion is to be discussed, or another one pertaining to it, and we'll get to that in a minute. Second, rules of study. Any intelligent and conscientious group will frequently find that it needs, or at least that it wants, more information about a subject before taking action on it. Thus, the rules need to provide for a way to get that information and to put off a decision until the information becomes available. The rules that govern the presentation of reports, the option of referring something to a committee, and tabling of motions have this purpose. This is another case where parliamentary procedure gets a bad name because legislatures often misuse it. Referrals to the committee, tabling are often used not to defer action until it can be more intelligently taken, but to avoid making a decision altogether. But the existence of your committee is an example of their right function, to provide information to another group so it can make a better decision. Last, rules of discussion. Compromise drives all rules of discussion. On the one hand, you want to hear from as many people as possible and hear from them as often as they wish to speak, in case they may have something new to add. On the other hand, we only live so long, and time is often a major constraint. Deliberative bodies can only meet on certain occasions and for a limited time, so some balance needs to be struck between the desire to hear as much as possible and the desire to get things done once we've heard enough. Rules providing for limitations on discussion, including limiting the time to be spent beforehand or shutting down the discussion that is underway already, serve this purpose. So also does the general principle that no one may speak more than twice on a motion before the assembly, and no one may speak a second time when anyone wishes to be heard for the first time. That's sort of a fundamental principle, which especially in a larger meeting, not necessarily a committee meeting, but in a larger general meeting, it's essential to enforce that. Note that I prefer the term discussion here, the more common term that and the one that Roberts uses, debate. I don't like debate because it implies a contest between two sides. Discussion often is a contest, but there's always more than two sides involved. So I think discussion is better. All right, so that brings us then to action. I'm only one ahead of myself now. Assemblies act by voting. Voting itself is a simple matter. The usual form of a vote is for the chair to ask for a verbal vote, with the affirmative side always speaking first. For example, all in favor say aye, all opposed say no. Always make it different. All right. The chair then announces the winning side, always. Questions of whether a vote is the best way to decide matters can be left to other venues. We're committed to democracy if we're involved in these meetings, and the other requirements about voting are simply intended to make sure it works. It won't work if the vote is not accurately counted. So any member can ask for a division of the House, usually just a show of hands, to make sure the vote count was correct. If they have questions about the chair's ears, they can do that. The term division of the House arises from the English Parliament, where when they vote on a question in the House of Commons, people in favor actually leave the House by one door, and people opposed leave the House by another door. So a literal division, but that terminology stays in Roberts. There's another thing that Roberts calls division, which we'll worry about later. But if the show of hands is not good enough, you can get a roll call. And it's always a good idea to have a roll call vote in the first place if the group that is meeting is elected representatives, because their constituents are entitled to know how they voted. And bylaws should specify that will be done. Calling for a division is one of the few cases where no recognition is required. You just stand up and call division, and then it has to be done. But it makes sense that there should be no formality about this, because any doubt about the validity of the vote really makes the whole process pointless. Voting will also not work if even one of the persons voting does not understand exactly what he or she is voting on. This is a key function of the chair, and it produces the careful classification of motions and the requirement that only one can be considered at a time. For example, if an amendment is offered to a motion, then the amendment must be discussed and voted on before the motion itself can be discussed. Everyone in the room needs to understand that this is the amendment that's being discussed, and voted on. And they need to understand what will be the effect of adopting or rejecting this amendment. Or to put it another way, what will I be doing if I vote in favor? What will I be doing if I vote against? The chair should explain that before every vote. So that brings us up here to this current slide, which is self-governance. Last thing of theoretical nature we have to always keep in mind is that deliberative assemblies, even committees that are created by parent bodies, are always, at least to some extent, belong to themselves. They're based on the principle of self-government. The only rules that can bind them are the ones they agree to. This, of course, was once considered a treasonable idea and is the significant of documents like the Mayflower Compact, in which the Pilgrims assumed the right to make rules for themselves. Assemblies are often called upon, therefore, not just to decide what to do, but how to do it. And this latter function is essential. One consequence of this is the importance of constitutions and bylaws, which every organization should have. If you want to use Robert's rules, you need to say, collectively by vote, that those are the rules you will go by. But we don't want self-government only. We also want good government. Good government, at least in the American understanding of the term, cannot be overly democratic because of the tendency of pure democracies to trample the rights of minorities. Madison's contributions to the Federalist Papers argue eloquently that the rights of majorities are protected by the fact that they're majorities, but the rights of minorities need to be protected by rules. Americans, fortunately, believe in machines. The Constitution is one. And Robert's rules, like the Constitution, are a machine that's intended to free us from worry about being overly democratic. In other words, we can do what we want, but by following the procedures he outlines, we'll be protected from our own worst impulses. We need to protect procedures, be loath to depart from them, unless we seem to have lost at the national level. So, basic things about deliberative assemblies in general. Selena suggested that I go into some basic things to do in meetings, how to do them properly under Roberts. So, first few things I'm going to talk about, not specifically pertaining to this committee, but would apply to any such group which you are a member. In emphasizing some, I have particular eye to events of a recent meeting of the State Executive Committee, and I'm going to hit on some things that are particularly relevant to what happened there. What follows, I'm going to use the term body to designate any organized group having characteristics of a deliberative assembly. That is, it can make decisions for its membership by way of a vote. For now, I'm speaking about bodies operating under Robert's Rules of Order, which they only do, again, if their bylaws specify that they will do so. If you're under Roberts, each member of such a body has some basic rights. Members have rights, non-members do not have rights. Non-members may have privileges extended to them by the body, either through the bylaws or by direct action at a meeting, but they have nothing theirs by right. Non-members may always be excluded from a meeting, and they may be excluded from speaking, even if they're allowed to attend. Now, that's not to say it's necessarily a good idea to exclude non-members, often quite the contrary. But there are times when you need to prevent them from speaking, because if you have too many of them, you can lose your own meeting. It can be hijacked, basically. So what are these rights? Well, Roberts is a bit vague, but if you sift through it, you can piece them together. Slide. What are the fundamental rights of the members of a deliberative assembly? First, you have the right to have that meeting conducted according to an established order of business, which means, first, that you as a member of the body have been properly notified of the time and the place of the meeting. Note that this proper notification includes the fact that the place must be accessible and the time has to be distant enough so that members can make arrangements. Second, the business of the meeting follows a set pattern. That is, unfinished business before new business and so on. Third, that motions and other matters like points of privilege or order are dealt with in the proper sequence. In other words, you have the right to expect Robert's rules to be followed. Second, you have the right to participate fully in the meeting, which includes being able to speak on any issue that comes up, with limitations I'll get into later. Be able to hear what others are saying. Be able to bring proposals for action before the body by making motions, and to vote on motions. And as we mentioned, we've shown that votes are accurately reported if you request. Let's go over these one by one, sort of. Selena told me she would like the AAC to provide a sort of model for other organizations, so I'm going to incorporate some recommendations as we go. The best way to be sure meetings are accessible is to set their time and place in bylaws so that everyone knows what they're getting to when they agree to be on and remain on the committee. If you know that a committee is meeting on a certain day each month at a certain time, and you cannot attend that meeting, this is particularly relevant to Zoom things, then you should not be on that committee. Somebody else should. You have to deviate from this. Bylaw should also specify how much notice has to be given. There often is a need to have a special meeting. Well, if you're going to do that, how much notice do you have to give? 7 days, 2 weeks? You need to spell it out. As a committee, the AAC, especially as sort of as a committee, the committees don't need many bylaws, but this is one that you need. Second, Robert's Rules of Order lays out a set order of business, which has not changed in a century or more. And it hasn't changed because it was natural and logical in the first place. So you can find it even in free versions available online. Basically, it's minutes followed by reports, then unfinished business, new business, announcements, which may include a sort of good of the order, remarks, and adjournment. I should note there is no such thing as old business. If something has come up in discussion before, but there's no motion made, it's no different than something that comes up for the first time. Unless a motion was made, it's just water under the bridge. If a motion was made and not been resolved, it becomes unfinished business and has priority. We finished doing what we started before we start something. There are a lot of things that can lead to variations in this order. In many cases, it will be advisable to change the order. This order of events can always be suspended at a meeting, but only by a 2/3 vote. If you need to do that, you need to suspend the rules, and any rules in Roberts, except for the basic rights of members, can be suspended by a 2/3 vote. What you do is you say, I move to suspend the rules in order to, and then say what it is you want to do. You do not say, I move to suspend this rule or that rule, because you may overlook one, which would inadvertently mess things up. So just say, I move to suspend the rules, and that will cover any rules that get in the way of what you want to do. So I move to suspend the rules in order to move immediately to this new item of business, which is more pressing than the old one, or something like that. Bylaw rules cannot be suspended, but anything in Roberts can. Bylaw rules can be amended, but you can't just waive them for a particular meeting. We should also note here that an agenda is not an official order of business. It's an order in which somebody would like to see things done. Only if the body adopts the agenda as their own does it have any authority. This brings us to motions. Motions which all else stands. The only way the body acts is on motions. That's the only thing it does that has a tangible result. Roberts gives us 4 classifications of motions. I'm going to mention them, but I don't think the terminology is particularly useful. Their function is what's more important. Most important of these is the main motion. The main motion proposes the body take some action. Let's see what our next slide. And of course, there you have it. I'll change it just for fun. Main motion proposes that the body take some action. like adopt a budget or endorse a plan or make a public collective statement or even perhaps disband as a body. Those are all main motions. The other kinds of motions, which are subsidiary, privileged, and incidental, take precedence over a main motion, meaning that they can interrupt consideration of the main motion. But that doesn't make them more important. It just makes them something we need to deal with first, just as deciding where to go to lunch may take precedence over everything else in your life for the moment, but that's not the most important thing you do, at least I hope not. So the main motion is what it's all about. So to make a motion, and this applies to any motion, how do you do it? So step by step. First, you have to be recognized by the chair. Now, Roberts is, in recent editions, has been dealing with the fact that more and more meetings have been conducted remotely thanks to advances in electronic communication. When telephone conferences came in, that was a problem for them. And of course now with Zoom, that's a problem too, and, unless you want me to later on. Get into why that's so bad. All these electronic things have major problems associated with them. But if you're meeting in person, the traditional way to obtain recognition from the chair was to stand up. Well, that was changed to raise your hand in deference to those who had problems standing up. But if it's a Zoom meeting, you can't do that. Getting recognition from the chair at a Zoom meeting is always problematic. But it helps, perhaps, if when you try to get through at a Zoom meeting, you would announce that you intend to make a motion. If the chair hears that, then they should give you the floor in preference to anybody else. Because if there's no motion on the floor now, then that's a high priority item. So, second, then, once the chair recognizes you, say, I move this body, blah, 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 do whatever it is. Not I motion to, but I move with this body, do this. And it has to be precise. The action has to be precise, not that we do something about this problem or things along those lines. Generally, you should avoid whereas clauses in your motions for reasons which I can get into if you wish. Keep it simple. Third, unless the motion is a single short sentence, you need to have it written out the way you want it before you make it. And when you make the motion, you should present the written copy to the secretary or to him or her through the chair. That can be done electronically also in a Zoom meeting. Handwritten is always acceptable if you're meeting in person, but if it's lengthy or has to do with sensitive wording, you should probably work it out beforehand and have it typed out. The chair of a meeting is not obligated to accept the motion that is not presented in writing. And if you are chairing a meeting, especially a large meeting, you never should. You waste a lot of time trying to figure out what the person is trying to say if they haven't figured it out themselves beforehand. So, the motion is submitted, the chair then asks for a second. If there is no second, then the motion dies and the meeting goes on. If there is a second, then the chair usually reads the motion, but it's not too long. It opens the floor for discussion. Now, there's a little interval here between those things happening. If you want to suggest, say, a minor wording change in what was said, something that is just like a stylistic thing, or you detected a grammatical error or something like that, you can get the attention of the chair before the matter is open for discussion and ask, would the person make the motion be open to changing it to do this, that, or the other thing. Once the chair has announced it and open discussion, it's too late to do that. You can't change it then without a formal amendment. Even if the person who wrote the motion in the first place is in favor of the change, it still has to go through an amendment process, although there are ways to speed that up. I'd say also that it's a great advantage to be the one who makes a main motion. The main motion sets the agenda. After you set it, after you make your motion, all the discussion is going to be about the motion you made, about what you said. So if you want your ideas considered, the best way to do it is by making the motion yourself. In a way, you set the agenda for doing so. When I was a member of various groups, whether it was the faculty senate, the board of governors at Concord, I always wanted to make the motion because a lot of times inertia will carry your motion through. That is, some people who might not even like some parts of it would rather just pass it than object to it. Once a motion has been open for discussion, there are various things that can happen, or whether that somebody can do nothing happens. So, what kind of thing can happen to your motion? First, a motion that has to do with the motion on the floor can be made, or how to deal with that motion. It could be any of the following. First, it could be an amendment. An amendment can be offered that changes something. The amendment is offered in the form, I move to amend the motion on the floor by adding or deleting or substituting some words. You have to be precise. You can't say I amended, move to amend the motion by making it sound friendlier. You've got to have specific wording that you want to change. Now, an amendment has to be germane. These are connections. What does that mean? A motion for an amendment is germane if it relates to the purpose of the motion that it amends. It doesn't have to agree with it. For example, you could change a motion that's on the floor by saying, which says, we will do this, by adding the word not. So that it becomes, we will not do this. That's germane because it's about the same subject. Another thing you can do is replace the entirety of the motion with another motion that's on the same subject, or that is, you can move to do that. That's called a substitute motion. It would be substituting all these words for all of those. There's no such thing as a friendly amendment. All amendments are the same. Although, if the person who made the motion in the first place likes the amendment and they say so, that might help it pass. But the permission of the person who made the motion or the person who seconded it is not needed for any changes. Motion to amend must be seconded, and then discussion opens on whether to change the motion as suggested. I mentioned that the person who originally made the motion likes the new one. Often the amendment can be adopted by acclamation. The chair simply asks, does anyone object to making this change? And if no one objects, then you can do it that way. If anyone objects, you've got to vote. All right. What's the third thing that happened? An amendment to the amendment can be offered, which has the same rules as the amendment. But that's as far as it goes. An amendment to an amendment to amendment is out of order and an abomination. Well, so I should note now that the committees do not proceed this formally, except on rare occasions. This is more for general. The amendment then has to be voted on. A majority is enough for adoption of the amendment. If it's adopted, then discussion resumes on the motion as amended. If the amendment fails, then you're back to the original motion again. So, one thing, amendment. Second possibility, a motion as to how you're going to deal with this motion. And that would be, for example, to limit discussion. This is one of the most frequently made motions. Set a time limit for the total discussion. Say, I move to limit discussions to 15 minutes of this amendment. Excuse me. I move to limit discussion of this motion to 15 minutes. Or to say that I move to limit discussion by saying that nobody can speak for more. If this is passed, then, which it needs a 2/3 vote to do, then somebody, the chair or the secretary, has to have like a stopwatch and keep track of the time. well, you don't actually need a stopwatch, but basically you have to monitor that. So you can limit the debate, or you can also move to just end discussion immediately and vote. Roberts refers to that motion as previous question. It's commonly known as calling the question, which leads to some confusion. If a member says, I call the question, their call for the question has no more weight than if they called for free beer. It only has weight if they make it as a motion and 2/3 of the members approve. So limits can be a very valuable thing. The motion to end the discussion, the previous question, is rarely needed. In my experience, it's most often made when nobody wants to say anything more anyhow, and it leaves a bad taste. There are usually ways to get around having to take a call of the question vote. I can go into those more if you want. If you set a time limit, then you can extend that by another motion to extend, add another 10 minutes or something like that. Third possibility, the motion to suspend action on the main motion to be made. In other words, motion to study it further. One of the most common of these is to commit or refer. This will send it to some other group for further study, a committee or a subcommittee. If this is passed, it charges a committee. That is, it creates a committee, in many cases, tells them what they have to do. And as such, it should probably include a specific time when they should report back. If you create a committee to study something and don't say, have a report back by a certain time, like the next meeting, you may never get it back. So it's always a good idea to do that. If you're chairing a meeting and somebody makes a motion to fit to a committee, you should ask them if they want to include a time limit for reporting back. Second possibility, to just postpone dealing with it. Ask anybody else to think about it, but just not take action on it today. There are two forms of doing that. One is to postpone definitely. There is also such thing as postpone indefinitely, but we don't need to get into that. That is, postpone it to a certain time. The other is to table. When people talk about this, they usually say table the motion, no matter which one they mean, but there is a difference in terms of procedure, and the difference is that something postponed to a certain time will come back automatically for consideration at that time, whereas something that is tabled will not come back at all unless a motion to take it off the table is made and a majority approves. So most people who want to postpone something really want to postpone it. Well, most people who say, I want to table this, really mean that they want to postpone it to a certain time. Again, it's a good idea for the chair to ask, do you want this to come back automatically, or do you want it to remain out until somebody takes it up? All right. Those are called subsidiary motions, by the way. Now we get to privileged incidental motions, except they're not all motions, so that makes it a little more complicated. So what else could happen? A motion could be made or a point raised that doesn't have anything to do with the main motion itself, but has to do with the way the meeting is being conducted. This could be a point of privilege. A point of privilege can be raised at any time, and it's relevant to what is going on now. It requires recognition by the chair, but no second. Points of privilege include call for the orders of the day. That is, if something is being done, but it's not time for that to be done, then you can call for the orders of the day, which means you need to follow the established procedure. Second possibility, you can request some sort of conditions that preclude your ability to fully participate in the meeting be corrected. If it's an in-person meeting outside noise, it's a good example. If it's a Zoom meeting, excuse me, some sort of electronic malfunction needs to be fixed before they proceed. Generally speaking, the chair just directs the problem be fixed. But if the chair refuses to do that, then you can make a motion. Third, to raise a point of order. You raise a point of order when something is being done that is in violation of rules, whether that is Robert's Rules of Order, your organization's bylaws, or the actual statutory laws of the state and the nation. If something is against the rules, then you can raise a point saying this is against the rules, and either they will change their ways or not. I'll get into that more. You can also call for a point of order if a speaker is behaving unacceptably. Roberts has rules about speakers. Officially, in Robert's rules, no speaker is ever to mention the name of any other member. And that's to try to keep it from getting personal. But usually you're talking about something like profanity or personal attacks, things like that. The body doesn't have to listen to that. You can interrupt the speaker to call him or her to order, and the chair should do so. None of these points requires a second. The chair rules. If the chair's ruling is not to your liking, you can appeal it. You can make a motion to appeal the judgment of the chair, and then we'll vote on it. So I talked about suspending rules. So the other thing you can do is decide to stop the meeting. You can do that temporarily by a motion to recess. Recess is for a specific time or amount of time. You can recess for 10 minutes or until 7:15 or whatever. Okay. Ordinarily, people are not supposed to leave, but they can. But they all have to be back in their places by then. Or you can move to adjourn. Adjourn just means we're going to quit and go home. Everybody goes home, but that's not the end of things. A motion to adjourn is in order at any time in the meeting, no matter what else is on the floor. You can always quit and leave. But at your next meeting, things come back exactly as they were. If there was a main motion made and somebody had proposed an amendment, and then somebody says, move to adjourn, when you come back, you will be talking about the amendment to that main motion. That's part of unfinished business. So adjournment gets you out of the room now, but it doesn't make the issue go away. So I think that's my last slide. But I want to say now some things about committees in particular. All this has been more about general societies, deliberative assemblies in general. So let's talk about committees. Committee is a subgroup of a larger group. As such, it has no authority except that specifically given to it by the parent body. An ad hoc committee is formed for a particular purpose, usually to study an issue and report back to the main body with recommendations. Ad hoc, to the thing, to this, literally. When it has fulfilled the task it was assigned, an ad hoc committee dissolves. The body doesn't need to dissolve it. If they were directed to make a report at a certain time, they make the report, they're gone, they're done. There is no more committee. Ad hoc committees are most frequently used to draft something for discussion by the body or to vet something under consideration. If you want to draft something, the committee needs to be small. No more than 3, and possibly 1. 3 people was enough to draft the Declaration of Independence, and that was a reasonably successful job. So bigger groups than that have trouble actually producing something, and the point of making a draft is to produce a starting place. So the body can always change it, but you need to start with something. So if you want to get that draft produced, that starting point, give it a small committee. If you want to vet it, that is, if you want to find out what's potentially wrong with your idea, you want a large committee, because the more different viewpoints you hear from, the better off you are. That's ad hoc committees. There are also standing committees. A standing committee owes its existence to bylaws. Ad hoc committee owes its existence to an action at a meeting. The standing committee owes its existence to bylaws. Your committee, the AAC, actually exists indirectly because of the charter of the DNC and directly because of the bylaws of the West Virginia Democratic Party. Both of those, if I recall, both those sets of bylaws specify that Robert's Rules of Order be followed. They both add, except where they conflict with the bylaws, which is unneeded because Roberts includes that himself. If there's any conflict with the bylaws take precedence. The state executive committee is directed by those bylaws to set the committee up, but you're not a subcommittee of the state executive committee. You are a committee, actually, in some ways, with almost equal standing in terms of how basic the mandate is. Standing committees generally have areas of responsibility and some specified duties. Your specified duty for the AAC is the production of the affirmative action plan. Your area of responsibility, however, is the encouragement of minority group participation in the party. What this means is that when you're not working on the plan itself, you can be working on encouragement. You cannot actually do anything policy-wise, but you can certainly make suggestions, not actually in the plan, to the executive committee. Committees, by their nature, are informal. The only time that they are pure deliberative assemblies is when they propose a particular action on behalf of the committee. In the case of the AAC, approving the draft of the affirmative action plan that you want to submit, that's an official action, and you need to be somewhat formal when you're doing that. But otherwise, they don't have to follow the rules. Discussion in a committee can and should take place even if there's no motion on the floor. Committees can get together essentially and brainstorm. That's a valuable thing. Members of the committees are allowed to speak any number of times on an issue, although someone who has not yet spoken always gets precedence over one who has. Sometimes, in fact, it's a good idea to go around the room and ask every member of the committee what they think about something. You don't do that in a general meeting, but in a committee meeting, that's often good. In committees, the chair votes as a regular member, other than only when his or her vote would be decisive. I might mention that chairs can vote either to break a tie or to create one. Now, I believe that Vice President Harris voted to create a tie the other day. No, maybe not. Somebody did. Create a tie defeats a motion. Break a tie would pass one. The minutes of a committee should be scant on details of what happens. The purpose of a committee is to have free discussion. You don't want to set that down too much. What a particular member said, for example, should never be in the minutes. A general summary of topics discussed is not a bad idea, but committees are not required even to do that. Back when I did my course on parliamentary procedure, I had a colleague come in and talk to students about a consensus-based approach that actually can work very well in the informality of a committee where it's complicated, but has a really nice flow chart, which I could send. So that gets me to the end of what I have prepared. Okay, we're at an officially called meeting. Okay, something that's been done according to the proper authority and all that, right? We've gone through approval of the minutes from the last meeting, any kind of reports that need to be made There's to be reports of committees that have been asked to report, not just people that want to report something. So then, since there's no unfinished business, so we're into new business. Okay, so new business comes around, and there we've got somebody who wants to make a motion. So go ahead.
Thank you for recognizing me. I move that this body purchase a red truck.
Okay, is there a second to that?
I second it.
So, the motion is, and since that one was short enough, we will not have to have that submitted in writing. The motion is that the body purchase a red truck. And now,
would you accept an amendment to the motion?
Selena, that's actually a question to you, because I have not yet stated the question for debate yet. Did I? I shouldn't have. Okay. I meant to pause to wait and see if somebody wanted to suggest a wording change. Okay. If you're chairing a meeting, that's a good idea. It's best to thrash out these little things, especially if people are coming up with motions on the spur of the moment. Okay. Often somebody will have a better word or a different way to say it. So go ahead and make your suggestion there. We're still in like an informal discussion period.
I suggest that we modify that to be a red or blue truck.
Okay, what do you think about that? Is that good with you? Person who made the motion second, red or blue, does that sound reasonable?
I have a particular reason for wanting a red truck, so I'm going to say you can make that amendment later, but I'm going to stick with the red truck.
So if she wants to stick with a red truck, then that's what it is. So the motion before the body is that this body purchase a red truck. Okay. So the governor can fly someplace and give it away. No. Body purchase a red truck. Is there any discussion on this motion? Okay, now.
Is there a second?
Okay, the person who made the motion in the first place is customarily recognized first, so if they can explain why it is they think the body should buy a red truck. So I'm going to call on Selena again first.
Okay, and there was a second. I think Mary Thorpe made the second a little bit ago. Yes, so we need a truck to haul things around, and because our logo is red, I think that we can do more with this a little bit later, but I think it fits with what our organization is trying to do in terms of messaging. And therefore, I think that one, we need a truck because we need to haul stuff. And two, it needs to be red that we can work with it in terms of our image and messaging later on.
Okay. Now, if you make the motion, you have more priority as a speaker. You can also get priority as a speaker if you have indicated an intention to do something. Okay, and since we have somebody who has already suggested they might want to make an amendment, if maybe you want to speak, I'll recognize you next because you've already sort of gotten in line by suggesting something. So do you still want to proceed with your amendment?
Yes, I think that since our logo is red, having a blue truck would show off the logo better. Okay,
so what's your motion? Now, wait a second here. Okay, officially, the motion comes first, and then you explain why. But in practice, it's always a good idea to give a short preface like that, and then proceed immediately to your motion. So go ahead and make the motion to amend.
So I move that we amend the motion to be a red or blue truck.
Okay. Now, technically, that would be to add the words or blue, but nobody ever has to be that technical. As long as it's clear what the new wording is going to be, you're fine. Okay? So, the amendment would make the motion read red or blue truck. So we're now open for discussion on the question of whether or not the words or blue should be added here. Is there any discussion on this?
So, question, point of inquiry, I believe.
Yeah, question will work too. I mean,
Okay. All right.
Robert, one of Robert's rules is never be more formal than you have to be.
Okay.
So if your meeting is a relatively small one and the people you're dealing with are sensible people, you can get away with a lot of informality. So go ahead.
Okay, so I just put in the chat so people could be seeing what the motion and amendment what are. So we right now, the only thing that we can speak to and debate is not the whole motion, but just the addition of or blue. Is that correct?
If somebody says we don't need a truck, that would be out of order, because that does not have to do with the question of adding the color choice. So only things about the color choice are in order now.
So if somebody said that, if somebody said, look, we need a van instead of a truck. In fact, let's practice that. Kristen, you raise your hand and you start talking about that, and let's see how Dr. Brichford deals with that.
Question. Point of order. I'm not sure. I don't think we need a truck at all. I think we need a van. But we need to be able to move people around as well as things.
That will be in order later on if we get back to the main motion. But right now we are discussing only the question of color. Okay, whether we need a truck or not relevant now. So please save that for later. Are there any other comments or discussion about the question of whether we should add the color choice or not? Now, note that she said point of order, which technically would require a formal response, okay? But she doesn't really want one, and I'm not really going to give her one because we understand what it is. You just explain what's going on. It's fine, and we're all satisfied with that, right? And I trust that Kristen, you did not feel that you were, being savaged or insulted or anything by being asked to wait a little bit. So that's important. We want to make sure we don't trample anybody. Okay, so we're back on discussion of the question of whether we should add or blue to the motion. So hearing none, all those in favor of amending the motion to make it read a red or blue truck, signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
Nay.
So the chair's opinions, the ayes have it. Okay. Selena, you voted against that, but you could have voted for it even if you spoke against it. And Beatty, you could have voted against your own amendment. Some people think there's a requirement that somebody who makes a motion and seconds it have to vote for it. Not so. In fact, sometimes people will make motions that they want to have discussed and defeated. Right. So the motion, the amendment is adopted. We are now on the discussion of the question of the motion to that the body purchase a red or blue truck. Listen, you want to come? Would you like to? At this point, I'd be inclined to recognize
Kristen.
Kristen again. I'm confused by the names that are appearing underneath her. If she wants, now what you had to say would be in order.
Now I can say, good, thank you very much. Because I think it's important that my idea is that we get a van instead of a truck because we have to move people as well as things. And so a van would be much more useful to us.
Okay. Anything else? Or items of discussion? Mary?
I would like to know what the budget for this van or truck is. Can that come up here, or does that have to wait till later?
What you're asking for is something we haven't talked about yet. That's a point of information officially, which you could raise as a point of information, but you could also just ask. Okay.
Okay.
That is something that calls for information that can be reasonably provided by an officer of the body. That is, if you have a treasurer, all right, they should know what they have left. Okay. So if you ask that, then the chair would recognize the treasurer, say, well, how about it? How much money do we have left?
I think Bob Baker, we're going to call him the treasurer right now.
Okay. Who's the treasurer? You?
Um,
Okay.
Bob.
All right.
It says Robert on this, I noticed.
Okay.
Oh, well.
The question is how much she addresses that inquiry to me. It would not be appropriate for her to ask him directly. Okay. She can say, I would like to ask the treasurer, but it's the chair that's supposed to ask the treasurer. This is another one of those things to avoid direct interchange and acrimony. So everything goes through the chair. Everyone is supposed to speak only to the chair, not directly to another member. So she asked me, I ask you, how much money do we have left?
Well, the current bank balance is about $10,000, and I don't think that our organization could get a loan for anything more than that.
Okay. So, did you want to say something then? Now that you have that information, or
What about the original point of order for just asking how much a truck was going to cost?
that's just a question, a point of information, which I, as chair, handled. Okay, I passed the question on, got the answer, and I could repeat it to be more official, but since she heard you, that's good enough. So that's been taken care of.
Okay, I guess, I'm sorry, Mary, I cut you off. But I guess I didn't hear the cost of the truck. I heard how much we had in the treasury. Did we hear the cost of the truck, or am I missing something?
Yeah, I didn't hear it.
Okay, now I'll refer that back to Selena. If she, there's two ways. We could ask if she has any idea, okay? And that's one way to do it. Another possibility would be to amend the motion to say that buy a truck, but only if the cost is less than $10,000. Okay, so you would protect yourself against that. But in this case, let's just ask her if she believes that $10,000 would be sufficient to buy a new truck.
So it's my understanding that one of our people that supports our organization owns a used car lot, and they're willing to give us a really good deal, keep an eye out for things. So there's not a truck in mind just yet, and we don't have a price, but it does make sense that that we want to make that affordable. And so therefore, can I amend my own motion?
Yeah, it's not yours anymore. Once
okay.
the discussion's been opened, it belongs to the group.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for these questions, and therefore I would like to amend the current motion to insert or add so that it would read, I move that this organization purchase a red or blue truck that is no more than $10,000.
Okay. Is there a second for that amendment?
I second that.
Okay, I got a second there. Now, I want to back up for just a minute. Mary raised that question originally, okay, and one would presume that she did that for a reason. That is, based on the answer she got, say something further, which is why I first would go back to her. All right, because now that her question has been answered, we get to hear why she asked, which I presume is actually what came out.
Because I mean, and I got that our balance is $10,000, but do we really want to spend the whole $10,000 on this truck? I don't know what to say then. I won't agree to that, but, I mean, I'll vote against it. But anyway, I'm not sure what to do.
No, what you said is fine. You think that's, spending your whole balance would be excessive. Okay. There's a couple of other things you could do. You could make an amendment to the amendment. That is, you could propose that instead of $10,000, you put a limit of $5,000 on it. Change the 10 to 5. Okay. So if you want to do that, go ahead. That'll add stuff.
So I would like to amend the amendment and say that have the amendment be, I move that this organization purchase a red or blue truck that is no more than $5,000 or $5,000 maximum.
Okay. Is there a second to that? Okay, so we got a second. So now we have basically, does anybody want to make a further amendment to change it to 6,000? No, you can't do that. Okay, we've got an amendment and an amendment to the amendment. That's as far as it goes. So now we have to decide, do we want to change the 10 to 5? So the discussion now has to do with whether we want to change the $10,000 maximum to a $5,000. Does anyone wish to speak to that question? Marilyn.
Thank you. Can we form an exploratory committee for price comparison so that we're not just looking at the cars on the lot of our friend?
If you're asking me that as a question, I would say yes. Do you want to make a motion to form that committee?
Okay, so I'll start over. I move to form a committee to explore the various options for red or blue trucks within our price range.
Okay. I want to say that it's not at all uncommon for somebody to say something just like you did, ask a question of can we do this or even how you do this. And at that point, the chair, or in some cases the parliamentarian may help, should tell the member that that's their job, is to help them do what they want to do. Okay. The motion is to form an exploratory committee to look into trucks in that price range. Is there a second? Is there a second to the motion to form a committee?
Sure, I'll second it.
Okay. So if we decide to form a committee, then we'll constitute the committee, and that will take care of the motion. The motion will be sent to the committee, and will not come back until the committee reports. So as the chair, I would probably ask Marilyn, do you want this committee to report back within a certain time or take as long as they want?
I'd like for the committee to report back within 14 days.
Okay. So always a good idea. And never send a committee out without telling them when they have to come back.
Should she have originally moved to refer this matter to an exploratory committee and that should be constituted?
Okay, so we've got a time limit put on there. Okay, the next question is, do we want to say how it's constituted? If there is no direction in the meeting as to how it's constituted, I, as the chair, would appoint the members. Okay, and what I would do, what I'm supposed to do according to Roberts, would start with the person who makes the motion, which is punishment for making a motion, I suppose. But you'd be on the committee since you think it ought to be done. And indeed, the first person appointed by the chair is the chair of the committee. So they're responsible for getting the committee together and bringing back the report. So if that's all right, then nobody needs to say anything about constituting it. If you think that you want it constituted by some other means, okay, or that the members consist of, that there be a certain number of members, or that they be evenly divided by gender or something like that, like the state party does, then this would be the time to put in those kinds of additional things. So it would become a motion to refer it to an exploratory committee of X number of members to be elected by the whole body. Never do that, by the way. I mean, it's because there's no guarantee that who gets elected actually wants to do it. It's very cumbersome. But, I mean, you can do it that way if you want. So you want to suggest like a certain number of members or any other kind of restriction or qualification?
Me?
Bob, actually, who was one who brought that up.
Actually, my question is really more focused on whether she should have made a motion to refer it.
Technically, yes, but we understand what she means.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I don't care how it's constituted.
Okay. So we're willing to take what comes.
Yeah. It's kind of important. I mean, if you're going to refer to a committee, you need to, if you lay it out here, who's on this committee, then you don't have to worry about it later. And, you know, the more you are willing to deal on the front end, the less problems you'll have on the back end.
Okay. But let's go through it. I've got another, yes, but let's not change it, because I want to show how that would work, and then we can, but that's true in many cases. Mary, you.
I just want a question here because I don't know how to fit it. How do we bring that conversation with Kristen about the van? Do we have to vote against this and then do the whole thing that includes the van? Or we can't make any more motion or amendments to this? So could you just speak to that a minute?
So if a committee is created, this is referred to a committee, the question just as it currently stands will go there, except that the charge of the committee was a narrower one. Okay. And right now we're not on the ban thing because we did we have a motion to change it to ban? No, the motion had to do with the money. Okay. So the committee is exploring that. And when it comes back will be the time that we have to deal with the ban thing. So it goes off to a committee. When the committee brings it back, it comes back exactly where it was, except that we got the benefit of their report. Okay. So we have a motion to create an exploratory committee to research the costs of these things. And we had a second to that. All in favor, say, with report within 14 days. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Let's have it. Okay. So since no restrictions are placed on the committee, as chair, I'm going to appoint it. I'm going to start by appointing Marilyn as the chair if she's willing to do it. Are you? Are you willing to accept that? Okay. Is there anyone else who would be willing to serve on this committee? Mary? So I have 2, and Laura. So I have 3. And Selena also? So unless there's any sort of objection or anyone else, I would like to appoint the committee with Marilyn as the chair and those 3 members. Okay, and that's done. Now, as chair, I don't have to ask for that. It's within the rules that what the chair does goes. But as a chair, it's always a good idea to ask, is that all right with everybody? So you have the informal agreement of the whole group. Okay. Ordinarily, nobody's going to object because they're afraid that you're going to ask them to be on the committee. But the big advantage of having the chair do it rather than elect it or try to specify too much in advance is that you can ask people if they're willing to do this or not. And committees need to be committees of the willing. You have to have people that are willing to do it, or everybody else on the committee is going to be mad at them. Okay. So at that point, the whole thing has been sent off to committee, and we'll bring it back here in a minute. So would you Mary, you had a question.
I did. What I was going to say is, while we're looking at for the red and blue truck, can I have my ears open for looking for a van to bring that information back?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's no restriction on what you do. So we go to now to the next meeting, 14 days down the road. Okay. And we're going to hear the report. So we've had the new meeting, minutes of the last meeting done. First thing up is a report from the committee delivered by Marilyn. So what's your report?
We found that the best deal was on our friend's lot for a red truck. $4,985.
Okay. So that's the report of the committee. Okay. No one else on the committee has the right to say anything for the committee. There is no minority report in a committee unless the body authorizes it. So the committee has spoken, okay, and that's it for the moment, okay, until we get to unfinished business, okay. So once we get to unfinished business, the motion before the body is to change the amount of money, the maximum amount to be spent from $10,000 to $5,000. Okay. Is there any further discussion of the motion to go from $10,000 to $5,000? All right. All in favor of the motion, which would change to $5,000? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. The ayes have it. Okay. So it now reads by a red or blue truck, costs not to exceed $5,000. Okay. So that's the motion as it currently stands. Is there any further discussion? And I'm going back to Mary because I know she has something to say. Go ahead.
I would like to amend the motion to say, I move that this, original purchase of a red or blue truck that has no more than $5,000 be said that change it to add truck or van.
Okay. That's more than you need to say. Okay. Just say that you want to change it to read truck or van.
Thank you.
Unless you have the whole written thing before you, don't even embark on that kind of stuff. But that's the advantage that the secretary and the chair should have. They've got the written thing. And if you just say, I want to add the words or van there, then they should be able to take care of that. Okay, so the motion is that we add the words or van to the motion. Now, I've got Marlene there.
Yeah, I wasn't at the last meeting. I don't know that we had the money in our budget. Is there designated money for this truck, and where's it coming from?
Okay. So since I've already had that answered for me before, I will pass, as the chair, it's my job to pass that information on. That is, at the last meeting, the treasurer reported we had $10,000 remaining in the account. I might then say, is that still the case to the treasurer? And if he says yes, and says, I'm told that that's still the case.
That's not quite the same thing as having it in the budget, though.
No, it's not. Or designated money for transportation.
Well, I would presume that this thing is not in the budget anyhow, that it's a purchase out of funds available. Okay. But if you want to say we have a budget for transportation and it's only, buys bus tokens, then that would be a thing to be added to the debate. It might bear on whether it was a good idea to do it or not.
Okay, now I have a question. Mary added an amendment about the van.
Right.
But did we not pass the previous amendment about a red or blue truck for $5,000? Did that not go through? And is that now over and done with?
Now, the amendments have passed, but all that has done is change the motion that's under discussion. The motion under discussion is now to buy a red or blue truck or under $5,000. And that's open to be amended in a different way, such as by adding the words or van. We're back to the main motion as amended. Okay. So it's been moved to add the words or van. Is there a second to that? There's a second. Okay. Discussion.
Seems like a great idea to me.
Okay. Marilyn should speak up here, okay, and say that unless they actually looked into vans as well, she should still say that the committee only looked at truck prices. I think that's a useful thing, and since they've already gone into that, probably something that ought to be contributed here. Okay.
Okay, so
Did you
the committee just looked at trucks since that was our mandate at that time. We did find a truck that was a really good deal that was blue on another lot, but it does exceed our budget. So the committee has decided to present back to you the information about the red truck that was on the lot we already knew about.
Okay. So that's a useful contribution. Selena, you had your hand up there.
Yeah, I guys, we have so much work to do, and we have things to haul. We've got lots of things to haul, and we're not going to be able to haul them in a van. We can haul people in a van, and if our main purpose is to move people around, we need a van. But we have all this work to do that we've agreed to, and we need to move a lot of lumber and concrete and things like that. And at this point in our organization, I think we have to have a truck. So I'm going to encourage us to, out of all due respect to my friend Kristen, I ask that you reject this amendment and that we purchase leave it at a truck. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Can I withdraw my motion to add or van?
No.
Okay.
But you can say that well, actually you can't. Do you want to withdraw it?
I do.
Tell me that. Okay. So what I have to do now is say that there has been a request to withdraw this motion. Is there any objection to doing so? If there's no objection, then we can withdraw it. But if somebody said, no, I think it's a good idea, then we can't withdraw it. We have to go ahead and vote on it. But since there is nobody who would object to that, we can go ahead and withdraw it. Okay. So the motion is withdrawn. We're back to discussion of should the body purchase a red or blue truck or cost not to exceed $5,000. Is there discussion on that? Okay. So we proceed then to a vote. All in favor of the motion to purchase a red or blue truck at a cost not exceeding $5,000, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. Somebody say no.
No.
Okay. So, in my opinion, the ayes have it. Now, in this case, there are a lot of ayes and only one no. But let's say we had several voices on each side. Somebody can say, well, I'm not sure you counted that right. So what they say is, I ask for a division. Okay. So if a request is made for a division, then it's my duty as the chair to take the vote by another means. Okay. So I'm going to ask for a show of hands.
Dr. Brichford, you don't have to have a second. Like a division just stands alone. You don't have to vote on it. You just, a division.
Don't have to be recognized. Yeah, don't have to be recognized. Don't have to be a second. That shows how fundamentally important it is. Okay. So the division has been called for. Those who are in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand at this time. Hands up if you're in favor. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All those opposed? 1, 2. Okay. The vote is 6-2. The ayes have it. Okay. When there is a division that involves counting things, you always announce the count as well. Okay.
How do you do it on Zoom if you have more than one screen of people?
Yeah. Well, let me come back to that in just a moment. Okay. Now that the motion has been adopted, okay, the chair's duty is to direct somebody to carry it out, or actually it's the chair who's been directed to carry it out. So you should announce, well, pursuant to this motion, I will attempt to purchase a truck for less than $5,000. Okay. And then that ends it. Okay. So Zoom is a problem. Okay. I've got 4 names on my screen here, okay, with no picture. So obviously, if you're not participating in a video way, if you have a show of hands, that's not going to work. So if you got a Zoom meeting and you happen to know who's there, like you've got the roster here, you're probably better off going down there and calling the names, call the roll. Okay, you would not record who voted which way in a meeting like this, just that they did so. Okay, so go left to right till you get down there, make your marks, and get the total. So that's the way you have to deal with it. If you got a huge Zoom meeting, then you've got a huge problem. When the state executive committee meets by Zoom, they have 50-something members. They
80 members, 84 or something.
They have to call the roll of the whole membership to find out who's there and who's not. Now, that raises some interesting questions about quorum. Okay, what's the quorum for the state committee? It's a majority, isn't it?
No, 40%.
40%. Yeah, you can set your quorum at any level. Some organizations have a very low level. The British House of Lords at one time had a quorum of 3 out of like several hundred members. But the standard is a majority, but lesser amounts. So 40%. For the Zoom meeting, 40% of the people have to have been logged in and appear somehow or other to the secretary who's seeing who's there for the meeting to be official. But when the vote is taken, you may not hear from them all. Right? If the vote is, only 35% of the total membership may vote, that doesn't mean you didn't have a quorum, because people have the option of not voting, or electronically they may not be heard or something like that. It does raise a question. If you've got a meeting where only 10 people are voting, you got to ask how many people are still at this meeting. And if it's not a meeting that has a quorum anymore, somebody can point that out as a point of order, that we really can't do anything with a small number of people. That's the reason why you have quorum, is to make sure no action is taken when just a few people are present. So a member it's not like the legislature, House of Representatives, where you can suggest the absence of a quorum and then they have to do a roll call. Or is it the Senate that does it that way? I think that's the Senate. Whenever they want to, go and get a cheeseburger, they suggest the absence of a quorum. They have to be called. But if there's good reason to believe that there is no longer a quorum, you can raise that. And it's the chair's duty to end the meeting if there isn't a quorum. This issue came up at the last state convention. Had they lost their quorum by the time things were being done. Selena.
So somebody sent me a message and wanted me to ask this question. And just so you know, this has been really, really valuable. People have had to jump off, but are saying how incredibly valuable this has been. But the question is, how do you deal with disruptive members, both in Zoom meetings and in in-person meetings? Okay.
The chair is the point person on stopping disruption. And it depends on what kind of disruption it is. I mean, if they are interrupting other speakers, the chair should say, you are interrupting another speaker. You have to wait your turn. If you persist in doing so, you're going to be denied the right to speak. You can take away the floor from somebody for not doing it properly. If they're just going to keep breaking in, there's nothing you can do about it, really. In many ways, it's an honor system. We expect people in these events to be sensible and responsible people. If you've got somebody who just basically wants to vandalize things, we're not really set up to do that. In most organizations, you can expel members who have a repeated history of that. You can censure them and things like that. There's a whole procedure in Roberts for going through that. But anytime you do that, everybody loses. So first, you hope that the people you get are going to be responsible. But the second possibility is the chair's responsibility to rein them in. If the chair doesn't do it, you can raise it as a point of order. Say the member is out of order, like especially if they're speaking disrespectfully of any individual in the group or group of individuals, I suppose. When they start saying you're all a bunch of lying so-and-sos, that's out of order. And anybody can raise that point, and the chair should call the member to order. We have to speak properly. So I don't know how there may be electronic things you can do to disrupt the Zoom meeting. I don't know. What electronic sabotage knows. Okay, so anything else then?
I appreciate it very much. This has been really helpful for me. But I've got to go.
Well, I think, that's a consensus view. So,
Thank you.
all right, very good.
Thank you.